the Arditi. Ulla Victoria, Ulla Tutti Chioppiati. Either we all win or we all die. The Arditi. Many people are familiar with the German shock assault troop unit, but other nations, even Italy, developed their own shock troops to break barbed wire and enemy defences, but today we'll be looking at the brave, the daring ones, the Arditi. The origins of the Arditi laid in the units of death. These were groups of frontline men who would perform cutting or even blasting enemy barbed wire and paving a way for the enemy assaults. So they were kind of like stormtroopers. The difference between the Arditi and the companies of death, however, or COD for short, yes, COD. The COD were like combat engineers paving the way for troops, while the Arditi were the assault units that would actually take advantage of the broken defences and clear the trenches. The Arditi, however, is very similar to the Germans, were of course very chosen and handpicked. Only the bravest of men were chosen and willing to engage in hand-to-hand combat with knives, trench raids, grenades, and pistols to short carbine rifles. The first tactical deployment of the Arditi were to advance in the cover of friendly artillery fire after the barrage. Then they would jump into the trenches with daggers and hand grenades, like I just said, and they would clear and occupy the trench for a whole day until reinforcements had arrived. The Italians and Germans kind of have the same idea around the same time, but both units were original and had its own origins in their own rights, and there's only so much units you could base around trench warfare, because I mean you have to break the trench. So at the end of the day, if I do more of these, it's basically more the same thing, only different country, probably different tactics, but they're basically like an elite trench raiding group at the end of the day, most of them. They were, however, influenced by the Austrian-Hungarians, of all people, and their unit of the Aga commandos, which were formed in spontaneous units for trench raiding. But when they had what they had in common with German stormtroopers were very specialist weapons like the Automatico and specifically designed carbines, like I said, very short rifles, pistols, hand grenades, stuff that normal troops in the front lines won't get. And they even had flamethrowers. Yes, flamethrowers. They had their own uniforms, their own emblems. Those were mostly of them were picked from the Versalieri or the Alpini, so depending on which group they came from, a different flame or insignia would be on their upper collar, outer collar popped out. So the Bersielli had the red flame, the Alpinis, mountain troops, had the green flame, and normal frontline troops that were recruiting into the Arditi would have a black flame. The main emblem, of course, their signature go-to emblem was the skull with a knife clinched between its teeth. Most iconic Arditi image ever. It had to represent something, and what it did represent was the willingness to die and fight to the death. That's the skull, and the knife was the brutal hand-to-hand combat and vicious stabbing that would happen in the trenches when the Arditi was engaged in combat. They would never surrender. They were deployed by Roman numerals and knots. After they lost a lot of volunteers and losses began to mount, soldiers were to be assigned to Arditi units, because like I stated before, the Arditi were a voluntary group, but after the losses have started mounting, of course you're going to need regular soldiers to fill these stormtrooper-esque roles and spots. but they were still high standard and high quality, so they were still recommended by officers and very high ups. So many of them were crack troops already, like the Alpinis and the Bersaglieri, and known for their stamina, but they were trained in a special school behind the Asonzo River, of all places, a school that mimicked frontline conditions, especially with explosives, and of course, resulting in that most recruits did not make it. The toll for the Arditis on the front was a 25 to 30% death rate per attack. Their motto was, "We all win or we all die." Sometimes they actually all did die, but they did have special privileges, just like the stormtroopers. They had better meals, housing away from the front. They had 3 times as pay, and if a regular soldier, and they get bonuses for capturing artillery officers, generals, guns, weapons, and stuff like that. And of course, they would get better meals, hot meals, but just a slight couple of privileges, nothing more, nothing less. The thing is, they don't really play a huge important military or operational role as the stormtroopers did, but however they were a symbol to the military and political morale, and they did however give morale and pride to the troops, so they were good at that. They were a morale booster. The only significant time, however, though they had operational advantages were the offensive of Vittorio Veneto in October 1918, basically the end of the war. 12 Arditi units were formed into 12 assault divisions, the largest concentration of Arditi forces in the whole war. This spearheaded the assault and paved the way for the Italian victory. It was however tainted though, because by this time, October, November, basically 1 month of the war was basically going to end, so all the Serbs and Slovenes and Croats and Bosnians and Herzegovinians were starting nationalist parades. They saw the empire was crumbling, so they took the opportunity to have a nationalist uprising of sorts and declare independence for their Pacific countries, even though they became Yugoslavia, but it was a start. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire had mass desertions because of these national uprisings, but that didn't stop the Arditi from becoming a symbol of Italian pride. They did, however, had influence on the post-war of Italy. Gabriele D'Annunzio used them in a coup d'etat, but was severely put down by the Italian army, but they were getting recognition. And leading up to World War II, of course, Mussolini had a very affection with knives, and it was in the Italian army, so both fascists and anti-fascists used them as symbols of pride, the brave and the patriotic Arditi.